The last bit of our scene setup rendering part is going to be our fog and our clouds that we're going to be using to make the scene look a bit more interesting, give it a bit more atmospheric feel. And so if you remember from the beginning, where we had the references, so let's just quickly jump over these again just to get these back into mind. And so what we're aiming for here is a more cloudy, overcast kind of feeling where we do get a bit of reflection in the water, but it's not a completely bright day. And we have like some fog, some clouds hanging in the mountains. And if we just keep going through these, I think it's going to be a combination of these clouds here that we see there, and also some fog, overall fog, so something similar to this, I think. So if we just, let me see what we're gonna, it's probably gonna be something like this, where we do have like a bit of fog, and then we see a bit of the trees, and then some clouds in the mountains. And so let's go ahead and create those. So first, let's start with our fog, since this is I'd say the most simplest one. Let's just make ourselves a bit of room here in our environment rendering section part here. And let's go ahead and drop down a new geonode. And what we'll do here is we're just going to create a big box of density. And then in the shader, we're going to add a bit of noise, a bit of animation to it. And then have this rendered as a regular fog. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly give this a proper name. So this is going to be our render, and then this is part of our scene, and the type is volume, and then we'll just call this our fog. And then let's color this our purple, jump inside, drop down a box, and then we'll quickly scale this up. Might be good to have our actual mountains visible so we can see how far we have to go. And so we'll just quickly turn these on here, and there we go. And now let's jump inside our fog and show our objects here. And so I think we can go a bit bigger. Let's go for 4 kilometers. Oops, not 400 meters, but and then 1,000, and then in the height, let's go for 600 or something. And this, I think, should cover it all. We're just going to go ahead, copy the height, paste relative reference down in the center, and then multiply this by 0.5, and then this should be sitting on the surface. And now we just want to push it beyond the surface so it sits a bit lower, so like this. So what we'll do here is we'll just go ahead and subtract a value. So let's just put this in parentheses here. Oops, 0.5, and then minus 200. And now let's convert this to polygons. So VDB from polygon, not to polygons, but to density. Sorry for that. And before we hook this up, this is really huge. Make sure to set this to a good amount here. So I'm going to go for 10 here. And then let's change this to density and also fill the interior. Then hook this up. And now we should have a fog. Now, if we jump inside one of our cameras, for example, let's go to 10. This is a bit too dense, but we'll handle this in the rendering part. So now let's just create a quick null here, and then call this render, and then hold down T, drag over this to set the render flag properly. So just in case we do some modifications here in the display, we have that updated correctly and always rendering our render flag. Now, if we jump inside our shading part here, I've already pre-set up a shader, since this is not the main focus of this course, creating fogs and stuff, but it's super simple. So basically what I'm doing here, let's just make this a bit bigger so we can get a better overview. First part here, grabbing the density. So I'm just binding the density I just created a null here just to reference this, just in case we need it. This is something that I tend to do, because if I want to, for example, grab this whole setup here and then put it in VOPs, for example, to have a direct feedback, I'll do this way. And then what I'll do with these is have the density and then this multiplied by a bunch of different parameters. So the first one that we have is our global multiplier. And so if we jump up a level here, we see here our global multiplier, and this set is set to 0.01. So something really low density, since the fog shouldn't be just the white surface, but you should actually be able to see back to the mountains. So this is just a global multiplier, and then we have a bunch of different multipliers coming in as well. The first one is the position. So what I'm doing here is just from the surface globals, grabbing the current position, transforming this from the current space to object space, and then I'm fitting this, or I'm taking the Y position, and this gets fitted between 10 and 100. And so basically what this is doing is from starting at height value of 10 up to a height value of 100, it's going to fade down to 0. So here 10 represents 1 and 100 represents 0. So once the Y position is 100, everything gets multiplied down to 0. So this is just a fade off to the top. Then the next thing that we're doing here is we're taking the position, grabbing this into two different curl noises. So you can see here, just create a standard curl noise, hook up the position there. And the other thing that I'm adding is the time to the offset. But before we go into that, here, these two curl noises, they're basically standard curl noise, just with the different frequencies. So the first one is 0.1 and the second one is 0.03, just to have a bit of a breakup there and not entirely uniform noise all over. And then just grabbing the time here. Also, this is just a null, just to reference the time for different parts. If we want to just copy this entire setup into VOPs, for example, the globals are just going to be a bit different. That's why this will not connect properly. And so here, we're just having two of these. First one is going to be our X time. So I'll just call this speed side X. And then the other one is the speed up. So basically we have a upwards motion of our fog, or our noise that is moving through the fog. And then also a sideways movement, which I think we have also set up in our simulation, where we have a sideways movement in the wind. I think that is in the mist and in the smoke of the mist. We have this sideways movement, and so and then we just feed this into a float to vector. So the first one goes into the X position and the other one into the Y, and then this gets fed into the offset. Only addition for the second noise here is just an add constant, just to add a bit of an offset to the second noise, and that's basically it. Then from both noises, we just take the length and pipe this into the multiply as well. And since we're taking the length, will always be positive, so we're not going to get any negative densities here. And for the big noise here, I just added a constant of 0.01, so it never reaches 0. So this will never multiply the density down to 0. There's always going to be a bit of space there. So there's always going to be at least 0.01 density multiplication of the main density. And then this just gets fed into a regular volume shader core here into the density field. And the other thing that I changed here is the scattering phase. I set this really high so the volume or the light can really pass through this. And then just regular compute lighting. So fairly basic setup here. And we will go over this part here in our shader creation for the whitewater as well. So let's take our shader here, just select this, Control C, go over to our fog, rendering, material, and apply our shader. Let's just make this relative here. And now I think we can go ahead and do a quick test render of this. So we'll jump over here, and what we want is our environment. Let's just have a look where this is. So we have our environment background, main, and then we have our Probably don't need the bushes at the moment, just the trees and the trees foreground. And let's accept that. Oops, I jumped away. Let's go back here. So this is our force objects. And then for the phantom, we don't need the lights here, and we don't need this ship light here as well. We just need, probably just need the environment, that's enough. And of course we want to add in our fog as well. So we have our fog, where is it? Fog. Render scene volume fog, there we go. And also our water. So we have render effects geo, where is it? Render scene water, there we go. All right, let's see which camera are we using here. Shot 20. I think I would rather go for the wide shot. So let's go for shot 10, or cam 10 rather. Save our scene here, and then let's hit render. Now for the rendering part, there's a couple of things that I did change here. If we have a quick look under the render tab here, I just changed to just have the fog so we can get a better understanding, especially when looking at the alpha, since if we're rendering everything together, we're not going to be able to differentiate there and actually see how the alpha is contributing to the overall look. And so I just moved everything else here into the forced matte, and also in the rendering tab went here to the limits and just turned down the refraction, everything, because we do not need that for our fog. And also went ahead and lowered the shadow step rate, so we don't have a really high sampling there, because we're not going to see it, and we don't need it there. Now the other thing is this is probably, maybe you've noticed already, it's super slow to render. So what we want to do is, if we go to our water surface, we just which is using our water shader, and here if we check, it is using the true displacement. So what we want to do, this is something I think I talked about when we created this shader, is we're going to split this into two parts. So one that is using the displacement, which is going to be the actual rendering, and then the other one which will not use displacement, so just basically a bump. And this one is going to be for matte rendering. And so let's just call this bump, and then jump ahead here to our water surface, duplicate this node, and then we'll call this no displacement. And we'll just add our bump shader there, and then jump ahead into the mantra node here under objects, and then change this water to no displacement. And now let's have a quick render. And there we go. It's already rendering much quicker, and there's like no difference compared to before. Like, I don't see any. And this is just for the really small little waves there, and we definitely do not need this in our fog render. And so now we're getting the effect that we're after. This is currently the alpha channel. If you look at the color channel, there is this blue tint here, obviously because of the LUT that we're applying, but also because of the shading that is happening, since we're lighting this within volume or an environment light. And here you can already see like this slight breakup here in the alpha, which is creating a bit of variation inside of our fog here, and that's exactly the effect that we're after. And now one thing that I can see here, since we're not going that far back, we just want to get this sense of depth here in the front part where the trees are. We probably can exclude, for the rendering part, we can exclude the trees from the background, so we just need the foreground trees. And the bushes, I think we can ignore them completely. Maybe for the close-up shots, we'll have to change that. But yeah, for now, this should be fine. All right. So next, we're going to create our clouds. So let's stop that rendering process here. Quickly save that. Save our scene. Jump back to our scene view. And so here, let's just quickly create a new container under our FX net box or whatever we'll call that. We'll just call this clouds. Let's just color this green as well. Turn off the visibility flag here, jump inside. And so what we're going to be doing here is we will create a bunch of different clouds, so probably like 10 different clouds. and we're just going to save them to disk and then manually place them over the scene. And so first we want to create those clouds. So what we're going to be doing here, just quickly drop down a grid, up the resolution of that. Then we'll create a attribute noise just to break up, just to add a color here that we're going to be using for scattering. And so we'll just pipe this into the color. The signature will change to 1D, so we just need a grayscale value. That's fine there. For the element size, we're just going to up this. Let's see, 5 should be fine here. Drop down a scatter to scatter some points onto the surface. And what we'll do here is we will go to our, change this not to a total count, but rather to the density, and the density is going to be based off of the color. And so we'll just use our color attribute there. Turn off the relaxed iterations just so we get a nicer breakup here in the scattering, and just drop this down to 1 or something. That should be fine. Next, we'll drop down a p-scale, since what we're going to be doing now is going to be copying a bunch of grids onto this area here. And the thing that we can set up straight away is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be caching 10 frames, and for each frame we're going to have a different seed. And so the seed is going to be our frame number. So in this case, let's just go ahead here. Where is it? Under the scatter, and also under the attribute noise here in the offset, we can just add our frame, and then here under the scatter global seed, put in our frame here as well. And so once we start moving through this, we just get a different distribution, and that's how we're going to be creating our different cloud setups there. So now let's just create a random p-scale on each of these. So let's go ahead and take our p-scale random. We already set this up before in the other sections, so I hope you saved that here in the presets. Otherwise, just go ahead and grab it from there. And so we'll just call this random p-scale, and let's create another grid and a copy to points. Oops. Copy to points, hook up the grid there, and the input here. And so the scale that we want, let's go a bit bigger. And one thing that we have to change here in our p-scale, since everything has the same size, is not base this off the ID, but rather the point number, since we do not have an ID set up. And now we have some randomly distributed planes here. And so what we'll do here is add our frame into the seed as well. And so we'll also get a different distribution on each frame. And next, let's just drop down a fuse. So we start to connect these to each other. And so if we up this value here, we start to get some interesting patterns here. So let's just go for a value of 1. That should be fine. And so now if we start jumping through this, we just get different patches here. And what we want to do is displace this so it's not completely flat. And then we're going to be using this displaced surface to scatter some more points. And then that we're going to scatter some spheres and stuff. So we're just about creating some different random meshes that we can then turn into volumes and then add some noise to that. And so let's just drop down a remesh. Hook this up. Now we should get a higher resolution here that we can then displace. And I'll just drop down a mountain here. Have a quick look at our mesh displacing here. Let's go for a bit higher value. So we do displace this a bit higher. Let's go for 4. And now obviously the size is a bit too small. So we'll just scale this up. Go a bit higher. Something like this should be fine. And then let's create another color noise on this for our scatter. So we'll just copy this one up here, the one that we already created. See if we should be getting a random color value there. Grab the same scatter here, drop it at the bottom, connect this one here. Let's add a bit more points. Let's go for 3 or something. That should be fine. The seed is hooked up as well. That's good. And then we'll do another copy to points. And this time we're just going to copy a bunch of spheres onto this. Of course, we want to have another p-scale. So we'll just grab this one from the top there, paste it down here. And then let's drop down a sphere, hook this up there. Now, obviously, these are a bit too small. So on the p-scale, let's go a bit higher. Something like that. And then make the smallest spheres a bit bigger, so 0.3 or something. And now we get like some nice connection there. We want to go ahead and noise this up as well. So the geometry, right now we're just using a primitive, and we can't really modify that. We would have to convert this beforehand. But so here we're just going to go to polygons and then go for a higher frequency. So we do get a bit more of resolution there. And so we'll just drop down another attribute noise, hook this up here. And the attribute that we want to noise is the position itself. So if we have a look here, and what we will do here on the offset is just add our frame again. And now obviously it is changing over time, so we're not really going to see it on this single one here. But if we would, for example, drop down a time shift here, freeze the first frame, and then run through this, we could see the noise is actually changing, just to be sure we don't get the same noise pattern in the same position. Now we will go ahead and convert this to a VDB. So VDB from polygons. And so what we'll do here is convert this to a regular SDF, and then we will mesh this and then noise it up again. So now we get like these connected pieces here. And so let's go for a bit higher res here, 0.05 or something. That should be fine. So we really capture the noised up detail that we have. Then let's convert this back to polygons. So convert VDB. And as I said before, this is just one method to do it. There's many millions of different ways of doing this. And now you can see here, we have these connected pieces. And this is something that we need for our density creation later, because we do not want to have these spheres intersecting. And we're going to get like, you really be able to tell these different poly patches that you have in there. And now we're starting to get into something more organic shaped here. And now let's offset this again. So just grab our position noise here, paste it down there, hook it up in there. And now we get another offset here. So something that is nice and noised up here. And now we'll create a density field from this. So just drop down a VDB from polygons, and then we'll turn on the density field here. And then we'll go for something really low. For now, let's just multiply this by 2. Just so we get a bit lower res volume, and then later we'll just have this turned off again. And now already we can see we're getting some nice shapes just straight out of the geometry creation. And then obviously we want to go ahead and noise this up in a volume WAP as well. And what we're going to be doing in the volume WAP is we're going to be displacing this this density field. So we're going to be creating a noise on the position, and then using that newly noised up position to look up the density field. And then we're gonna, so that way we get a displaced volume. And to output that correctly, since VDB is deactivating regions that are outside that don't have any values, we first have to create a activate to basically open up those voxels to potentially fill with new density fields, density values. And then afterwards we can deactivate those again. So let's just drop down a VDB activate. And so we'll just hook this up here, VDB activate, check the expand, and then we'll just grab our resolution here, copy parameter, go here, and then we'll just divide by our resolution that we have. So the higher res we get, the more this will expand. So for example, here, if we multiply this by 1, the expansion is going to be even bigger, because of we want to keep the same expansion distance, but there's going to be double as much voxels there. So we have to expand it even further, because this is based off of voxels and not off of distance. And so now here you can also see we get a lot more detail as well that we can work with. And so now you can see here the expansion is even higher. And so let's just multiply this by 2, since you already saw this is quite slow. So this is good for now for the testing. Then let's do a volume WAP and then create our noises in here. And then afterwards, we're going to be deactivating. So we'll drop down a VDB, activate, and then turn on deactivate. And this way, for example, if you look here, first, before the activate, we have around 4 million voxels. After the activate, we're at 25 million, and then deactivated again, we're down to 4 million again. Obviously, it's not going to change because we didn't do anything yet. So jump inside here. And so what we want to do is we want to add a noise to our position. So we'll just hook up our position there, and then we'll do a volume sample. Oops. And hook up the sample position there. The input is going to be our first input, so ourselves. And then we're going to say here primitive name, just to be sure it's going to be density. And then this is the new value that is going to get output. And so now, just to confirm, everything is the same. So nothing is changing actually. And now we want to add some noises to this here. And so for volumes, I do like to use the curl noise. So let's just drop down a curl noise. Let's hook up the position here into our position. Let's promote the frequency and the offset. Let's just take the offset here. And since we're going to be using this offset on other notes as well. And of course here, we want to promote the amplitude as well. So promote that. Now for the detail level here, I'm just going to up this a bit. So just add a bit of turbulence here. So we have a bit more detail in the smaller regions. And then we'll take this, plug it into our add, and then we should already get a deformation. Could be that the noise is a bit too small. And then now we can see here, we're really pushing the volume here. Obviously this doesn't really look that interesting. So we do have to go ahead and adjust these values. So let's go for something really low here. Just going to turn on the manual mode, and then let's go for the smaller scale here, 0.3, something like that. Let's turn on auto update again. Now we probably have to up the amplitude as well. So let's go for a higher value. Let's try 20 or something. Let's see. There we go. Now we're getting some nice displacement here inside of our volume, getting a bit more organic shapes there. And now we would just want to add a bit of more high frequency noise in there as well. For the offset, I'm just going to add our frame here in the Y position. Now, one thing that I do notice is I'm not sure why this is happening, but if you go for really high offset values in the curl noise, you're going to start to introduce these artifacts. This is only in soft-vops. If you go for shading, this doesn't happen. So what we do here is just subtract our first frame. So this is 1001, and then we'll be at an offset of 0 again. And then we'll just add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 as an offset in there. And now we got rid of that strange banding effect that we just had. But we still have our current frame as an offset in there. Now jump inside again here, add a bit of high frequency noise. So we'll drop down a anti-alias noise just to have a bit of a different pattern there. Hook up our position, so the sampling position of the noise. And what I do want to do here is just change this to manual, otherwise it's just going to take forever to create this. The offset is going to be the same, so just hook that up there. Promote the amplitude, or first promote the frequency, and then promote the amplitude. And then we'll go ahead and change this to a 3D noise, and then add this to our position noise as well. And then let's just go up again, change the frequency to something higher. So we're at 0.03. I think maybe let's go for 0.1 or something. Just try that. And for the amplitude, let's also go a bit higher, probably 5. Let's just test that and turn on auto update there. Wait for this to cook. Yeah, and I think this is giving us some nice results. Maybe let's see what kind of resolution we have here. Yeah, so we could probably turn this off and then see the detail. I'm not sure what this is here. All right, let's just jump to our deactivate there. Now we can see our full detail that we're getting there. And now what we want to add, so we have like these nice swirly bits. We want to add an additional noise that we're just going to multiply into the density field, so we do get a value variation in the density itself. So this is now just an offset in position, so where the noise is living. So we get these nice curly shapes and stuff. And then for the next part, we're just going to go ahead and add a bit of additional noise in there as well. And I think maybe if we, since the frequency is a bit low, let's go a bit higher here. Just turn this to manual again. 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. Let's give this another try. and a bit lower in the amplitude. Let's go for 3 or something. Auto update. Yeah, and that gives a bit more detail here in these areas. Nice. All right, jump back in and let's just create another curl noise here. And of course, turn off the auto update again, because otherwise we're going to be recooking this volume VOP again and again on each node creation. Hook that up to the sample position here. Go ahead and promote the frequency and the amplitude. Offset is going to be hooked up to our main offset here. And then let's just open up these here, since we're going to be connecting them to our second curl noise as well. And then we just take the length of these, just as we did in our fog setup, if you remember in the shader. We'll just take this and then we'll multiply our density. So drop down a multiply here and then move this up and then add this as a multiplier in there. And then we'll copy this entire setup and then add this in here. So we're also going to have two different sizes of noise. Also for both of these, let's just change the turbulence again to 5. And maybe, yeah, let's go a bit lower in the roughness, just so we don't have that sharp noise. And here to add a variation in the frequency for the top one, this is going to be our high frequency noise. So let's just multiply constant, hook that in there, and then we're going to just multiply our frequency by 4. And then this is going to be our high frequency noise. And then for the amplitude, let's do a multiply constant as well. And let's just halve the amplitude and see if this gives us the result that we want. Obviously change the frequency again. So let's go down to 0.1. Let's go higher, 5 to start with. And then let's have a look at how this looks. I'll quickly save their scene just in case. Go back to auto update. There we go. And now we do have some variation in the density in our cloud here. And what we want to do here is drop down a volume visualize node just to see how this looks if we have a bit lower density. Then here under, so I'm not sure if I went over this, don't think so. But what I did is just drop down, let's just copy this node here, volume visualize node, and then let's revert this to default. And yeah, probably because I overrode those. So what I did here, just added an additional parameter. So edit parameter interface, add another one here. This is the one that I added, just called it multiplier. And then this is something that I do like to do to have a consistent volume visualizing nodes, because if you change, for example, the maximum density that you're taking into your volume visualize node, this does change the overall density. And so what I do, I just take the maximum, put it in here, so the range max, and then multiply this by my main multiplier. So no matter how high I go in the maximum density, this always updates in here. And then I just have a general multiplier to scale down the overall density look. And so if we have a look at our cloud here, and then for example here, if I go higher in my density sample, you can see I'm no longer cutting off my low density values in here. So for example, if we go really close here and we set this to a low value, so 0.1 or something, you can see I'm only getting all these low density values, and then everything else is getting clamped. And that's why this is important. This is not actually modifying the volume. This is just for visualization purposes. But do take this into consideration when you're doing the shading later, because you could, for example, just drop down a regular volume visualize node. This is clamping your density, and you're saying, oh yeah, this looks nice. And then into shading, you're rendering it, and then you see, oh, okay, I'm getting a really dense volume in there. This does not look like what I had in the viewport. And this is the reason, because the clamping, you would have to then go into your shader and then clamp your density basically at 1 to have the exact same result as you have here in the viewport. So this is why I like to visualize it this way. For example, if you're doing a volume sim and you have your dump import fields, make sure to compute your min and max values there, and then you can have a look at those and just plug them here into the maximum density, and then therefore get a correct visualization. And now here, let's just go a bit lower. So 0.25 or something. And I guess this is probably how we're going to have our clouds sitting inside the scene. So now that we're done with the creation, we can just go ahead and cache these. So let's just create a ROP cacher. We'll call this our cache clouds A, for example. Hook this up here. And then we'll just go ahead, break the connection here. We're just going to go from 1001 to 1010. And then we should have 10 frames that we cache there. All right, let's go ahead and save the, before we do this, first let's, in our, where is it? Jump into the scene, limit the resolution just so we don't get a viewport crash here. And then here on the VDB from polygons, change this. So just change this to manual, change this to 1 again, so we get the full resolution. And then let's go ahead and cache these. So save to disk. All right, and now we have a couple of different cloud variations here that we can then use to place them in our scene. So we'll go ahead and just copy this path here, jump up a level, and then over here in our environment section, let's go ahead and create a geometry container. So we'll just call this, so this will be a geonode, and this is going to be a render, and then environment, volume, and then bottom cloud, and then 1. All right, just put an underscore here, bottom cloud, and then 1. Give this a purple color here, and then let's jump inside, drop down a file node, and then paste our path in here. And so what we want to do is on our object level here is specify the cloud that we want to load and also add in a density scaler. So for example, if we want to scale the density of the cloud. So let's go parameter interface, drop down 1 integer value and 1 float for the density scaling. And let's just take these two, move them to the top, drop them down here. And then first one is going to be our cloud. Let's just call this variation, and then cloud variant, and then here this is going to be our density scale. Just hit apply here. So the default of our variant is going to be 101. This is the what we're going to be referring to the frame. And then here, we're just going to set this to 1, hit apply. And then now we can go ahead and grab these parameters. So copy parameter, jump inside here under the file. We're just going to replace this 1001 relative reference here by our variant on top. So that's going to be our load cloud. And then we're going to load this as a pack disk just to save us some rendering space there, and then display as full geometry because we do want to actually see it while placing it. And then we're just going to drop down a density scaler that we're then going to use as an override for our volume shader. So just call this density scaler f at density t, and then multiplier is equals to our multiplier times our scale. Just promote these two parameters. The first one is going to be our density scale. So let's just jump up, grab that one here, copy, jump inside, paste relative reference there. And then the multiplier, the general multiplier, is going to be our uniform scale. So just copy this because we will be scaling our volumes, and if we scale the volumes, the density is going to change. And I'll show you this in a moment. So if we go inside here, multiply, and then paste relative reference, and then 1 divided by this. So for example, if we go to a scale of 0.5, this is going to get a multiplication of 2. And if we scale this up, so for example, if we go to 2, this will be 0.5. That's why we divided 1 by that value. And next, we'll drop down a material just to finish this setup here, and then I'll show you the density scaling issue that we have and why I'm doing this based on the scale of the transform. So drop down a material, and then here we will assign our material, and then this will be, let's go up a level, and then materials, and then this will be probably a shader, then FX, volume, cloud. We still have to create this one, and we'll just create one override here. And the parameter we want to, we can't pick it yet, but what it's called, I think it's S density scale or something. That is the global density scale here. And we'll hook this up to our density scale value that we created here. And so here we have the density multiplier, and then we'll take that. So we'll just do point, and then we'll take the input. So up, input path, and then this will be of ourselves and the first input. And then this should give us our path, so we can just double check that by removing that there. Probably have to drop this into a, first evaluate this here like that. And then there we see it's pointing to this node here. So it's just taking the input of that node. So let's just remove that there. So we have our point expression, since we want to grab that point attribute here. And then this is where we want to get it from, 0.0. And the attribute we want to get is density. Mult. And we want to get it the first value, or since this is, for example, if you have vector values, you can here then grab the first, second, or third. And I'm not sure why this is not evaluating correctly. Let's just first go ahead and create that shader. So let's jump over to our scene, our shader scene here. And then here we already have our volume. Let's just drop down a pyro shader here, and then we'll call this shader effects volume cloud. I think that's what we called it. We'll keep the density scale at 1. For the smoke color, just set this to a value of 1. We'll turn off the fire intensity. Just change this to constant, and just set it to 0, just to be sure here. And that's it. So let's jump back here and now see if this, for some reason, is not evaluating correctly. It's complaining about this expression here. So if we remove that, now it works. And if we take that expression, put it in here, still get that error. And if we have a look at the end, this is probably habit of Vex. Remove that, and now, we get that value evaluated correctly. And then this is gonna run over to our shader that we have here. So if we, let's just jump here to the shader, and then this is gonna be our density scale. So S_density scale, and the value is just gonna run into here. And then therefore, if we scale it up, it's gonna be scaling this as well. And so to demonstrate that, let's just quickly create a box. Jump inside here, VDB from polygons, hook that up in there, and this will be density, fill interior. There we go. And now let's create a camera. Just move this up here as well. And then let's create a null. So we can, if we look through this camera here, for example, and we scale this up, our density box is going to grow with the camera, but the scale is going to be different. So let's just quickly do a test rendering here. So if we go to scale 1, go over to our render view, quickly save our scene just in case it crashes, open up the tab here, and we want to render our box 1. Remove that. Don't need our environment light there. and we want our cam 1, I think it is. Yeah. Yep. And then we just apply our shader here. So if we go ahead into our materials tab, oops, materials, shader, effects, and then it will be our volume cloud. Let's give this a quick test render. Now this is at scale 0. And so if we scale this up now to 10, for example, you can see the density is changing. And if the higher we go, 100, for example, this is getting really, really dense. We're looking at the alpha channel here because we don't have any lights. But as you can see, it's the exact same density box, or nothing really changing there. And in the viewport, I don't think you really see it, but it is changing via the scale. And now if we have the trick that we just added here, which is scaling, oops, not this one, but this one here, which is scaling the density based off of the multiplier here. So the bigger it gets, the higher the density is. So we have to counter that and multiply it down. And so if we take this same thing, whoops, jump up a level over here to our box, add that there, our density scale. And then of course we have to go and grab our material sign and the override, because otherwise that's not going to get picked up. So jump over to our box here again, paste that down there. And now let's override our main scaler, set that to 1. And of course, this is using this scale here. So let's just copy this scalar value here, go inside, and then paste it over here. Oops. Oops, 1C too much. There we go. And now we have this hooked up. So basically it's grabbing the scale that we have on this null, which is 100, for example, in this case. And then here we're just dividing 1 by this scale value. So we end up with 0.01. And so now no matter how high we scale this, so for example, if we go to 10, the density field is going to look the exact same. So if we're at scale 1 or 100, it's going to be the exact same. So this is something really important to take in consideration when you're scaling volumes or rather density fields, that this will change. And this, we do want to have a consistent density no matter how high we scale our clouds. So this just as a quick small detour there. So if we jump over to our scene again, to our volume clouds, and now we can go ahead and let's just disable these nodes here. Or I can just get rid of those. Probably don't need that anyway. Here. And let's just scale this up by 20 or something. And now turn on our water surface as well. So we have our water surface here. I can make this visible. And now we can go ahead, grab our cloud, and start pasting this, moving it around in our scene. Oops. For example, here, oops, and then move it down a bit. And then we have like this kind of foggy cloud thing living around here. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start placing these, and also we'll divide them into like the bottom ones that live on the surface of the lake, then have probably some medium ones that live on top here, somewhere in between the mountains, and then some very high ones. For example, if we go into shot 10 here, you can see here on the very top, we'll add some, just a bit of clouds around the top of the mountains up there. So I'm not going to have you watch me place 100 of these different clouds. I'm just going to go ahead, duplicate this. Also make sure to hear the cloud variant. So for example, here, if we change this to 2, it will grab a different cloud. And 3 is going to grab a different cloud. And so we do want to start to vary this, and also maybe vary the scale as well. And then we won't really see that these are using the same clouds over and over again. So I'll go ahead and place these, and then we'll come back once I've finished that. So I went ahead and placed these clouds here. I'm just going to quickly show them. So let's just select them. These are the ones that I placed in the bottom. I'm just going to wait for the viewport to update them. So you can see them, boom, 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 boom. Starting to place them. For some reason, this is really slow. probably due to the recording that I'm doing at the moment. Wow, this is super slow. Really, really slow. And as you can see, this is really, really lagging now. Wow. Let's just try to have a quick preview of this. I'm not going to turn on the other clouds because this is way too slow. I'm just going to do a test render and then show you that way. But now you can see basically they're just filling the bottom part here. Let's just go ahead and disable these. Since this is really getting a bit freaky here and making me wonder if the scene is going to crash any moment. So I'm just going to save that there. Let's head over to the rendering tab here and jump into the Mantra node. Hook up our correct camera. So that I think that was cam. Let's go for cam 10 and then camera properties. Get rid of that last slash because otherwise it's not going to render. Then we want to be rendering our clouds. And the way we can reference these is just typing render underscore, and then I think it's environment, volume underscore, and then wildcard, cloud, wildcard. So for the number and for the type. So for example, here we have bottom, mid, and then top. And then here we can just grab all of them. So if we just select this here, we can see it's grabbing all of them. That's just a quick way of checking if your wildcard is working. And then for the matte, we want to have our entire scene. So that would be, let me see, the no displaced water, our trees background, then the bushes, I think we can leave them out. I think there's at the top yet. And then we want to have our terrain foreground background and accept that. Let's see, anything else that we have to change here? I think that's fine. Let's save the scene and give this a quick test render. And now we can start to see our clouds here. And this is really looking nice. I mean, obviously they're not too advanced. You could keep working, adding a bit more resolution to them because they are a bit low res here, but for our purpose, this is more than enough. We can see these front islands are covered in a bit, and then we have like these sections here where there's like some clouds hanging there and there, which really adds some nice additional effect or interest to the entire scene. And once we start to composite this together with our environment render, this will really start to look interesting, especially towards the bottom where we get these trees looking out of the clouds. And if we remember from the reference that we had a look of, this is basically the effect that we're getting here, where we have these clouds living. There's like some areas where there's more, and then the rest is just a bit of fog, which we already added. All right, let's just have a look. Probably don't have any color information because we didn't turn on the light there, but overall, this is the effect that we're going for. And also here, if you can see to the top mountains, that's where I added a bit of clouds, maybe sticking up a bit in the air. And the thing, what you could do this through instancing as well. But I do like, for example, like for this kind of effect, I do like to have specific control over each cloud. So for example, if I see one, it's like, the rotation isn't that great. Or here, for example, if I look at this one here, that's something that I saw. This was sticking up too much, so I just took that cloud, moved it down a bit. It's just much easier to control it that way. And since we're using Pactus primitives, the rendering optimization is pretty good there anyway. And it's not that many. I mean, let's just select these and see how many we have. So 40 different clouds. It's not that much. And obviously, if you want to go more advanced here, you could start to simulate these, maybe add a slight bit of motion. That would also definitely help to create this more interesting. So these do move a bit. So we would create like an additional velocity field and just run these through a sim, maybe sim like 10 frames, and then just use the great new volume retime node to really slow that down, and then have this happen over, I don't know, 200, 300 frames, like a slight movement where this starts to move up or this starts to move down. The one thing that you do have to be careful there is if you're going for a specific direction, like or if you're adding a wind and you're rotating these, then it's not going to look weird that these move this way and the other ones move in that direction. So it would be just like a general noise that starts to move these apart or move them from one direction to another, just to have a bit of motion inside those clouds. Something that will help here is the camera motion, since we have a lot of them in the front, some in the background, that will get us some parallax there. But I think for our case, this is perfectly fine. And yeah, so I think this probably concludes the scene setup section. And so in the next part, we're going to go over the rendering setup for the whitewater, the water, and the mist